So this is a strange time to talk about the institutions of the White House, but I'm going to give you the contrast. You know, people want to know, what was the White House like when you were there? And it was definitely different under Reagan, different under George H.W. Bush, and different under George W. Bush. First of all, when I came to work at the White House, it was August of 1983 for President Reagan, and my office was in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building right across from the West Wing. And at 4:30 p.m., almost every day of the week, there was a broadcast on a PA system that said, "The lid is on. The lid is on." And it came from the press secretary's office, Marlon Fitzwater. And that meant no more news that day, because they had to give time for all of the reporters to get their act together to go meet with their editor before the column inches were allocated in the newspaper the next morning. And they didn't get to write the headline. Somebody else did at the newspaper. They didn't get to say how many column inches. Somebody else at the newspaper said that. And they had to demonstrate to an editor that they had at least two sources to justify their work. They didn't have to give the names, but they had to say, I have a quality source here and a quality source there. That's the story. And the editor would say, take out your adjectives and adverbs. You should be writing in nouns and verbs. Let people add the adjectives and adverbs. But that the lid is on statement was kind of a whew, if you were a staffer. Oh, I'm not going to get in trouble. And then you'd get a call from a desperate reporter saying, I've got one source, I need one more, can you help me? And the answer was no. So that discipline was interesting because it also applied to the three networks, and there were only three, ABC, NBC, and CBS. And the 7 o'clock news, everybody watched. And they had to get their material by 5 p.m. in order to be ready for 7 p.m. Eastern time. So the discipline in media was very different than it is today. They don't teach journalism the way they used to teach journalism. But we all had confidence in some of the personalities speaking on CBS, NBC, or ABC. And we had confidence in the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, because we knew there was an adult paying attention called an editor. And they weren't going to allow opinion to be on any page other than the opinion page. Now journalism is, you get rewarded if you're first, if you've used the most adjectives and adverbs and created lots of emotion. And you don't even have to have a really good source, you can have a good rumor. And if two people have the same rumor, that's good enough to go with it. And when CNN first came along, they were so desperate for having something to follow the word alert that they would troll all day long, give me something I can alert. And then CNN got competition, and they said, okay, give me something that I can alert first. And then we had radio talk show. Today we have ubiquitous relationships with our cell phones and everything that's digital. And every reporter is told to get more eyeballs and ears rather than the truth. So journalism has changed, which means the White House has changed. You used to have confidence that you could actually take a breath and consider the ramifications of a policy. Now you're afraid to acknowledge the policy because you don't want to be blamed for the ramifications of the policy. And so I find the White House itself is not as, I'm going to say, the paths of truth are hard to identify because emotion gets in the way. It's particularly a challenge in the halls of Congress. I wish they would ban cell phones from being able to come into the House chamber and the Senate chamber. And I say that with respect. You know, the great people who gave us a republic and democracy were Greeks. And Aristotle and Plato were very careful to remind those involved in democracy that the greatest threat to democracy is mob rule. John Adams and James Madison helped write our Constitution. They said the greatest threat to democracy is mob rule. And that's why John Adams responded when North Carolina delegates wrote a letter to him saying, "We're thinking of having a constitution in North Carolina. Will you help us write one? You wrote the one for Massachusetts. Can you help us in North Carolina?" And he wrote a wonderful memo back, Thoughts on Government. And he said, first of all, you need to have a group of people who are very close to the people, but not so close that they are the mob. But you want them to represent those views, but you want them to be able to represent the views so that you can exercise judgment over them. Acknowledge the views, be restrained in embracing them to exercise some judgment. And mob rule is such a danger, we need another branch of government, we call it the Senate, that will take the emotions that were lingered in the House and consider them, but try to push the emotions aside and get to logic. And the Senate would then act and deliver wisdom with logic. And that worked pretty well for a long time. And then in the early 1900s, a decision was made, and it sounds like it's going to be a good decision when you were asked to make it. Can we elect our senators by ourselves? The senators all had been elected by state legislatures. The great debates in Illinois that Abraham Lincoln participated in when he ran for the US Senate were debates to impact the Illinois legislature to vote for candidates to be the senator. A lot of people forget that. But in the early 1900s, America said, we will move to the direct election of our senators, which meant the state lost some of its power, but the people in the state gained it. And so where would a senator want to spend their time? Learning what the people thought, not necessarily what the state needed. So the mob has now been invited to be closer to the rule. And Aristotle, Plato, John Adams, and James Madison all suggested that that's a problem. Today, the House of Representatives kind of looks like the mob is already there. So I'm one of those people that says it would be great if we said you can't bring your cell phone device into the House or the Senate because every politician is a little bit paranoid, and that's a strength of democracy. They worry about us, so they care about us in theory. But I don't want them to have the emotion of our passion dictate the result if the result is not smart or justified or good. But most politicians can't wait for you to text them a message or send them an instant message or go to formerly known as X or Y or Z. Because you send your text message in, they get it on the floor of the House. The first thing they want to do, because you're a constituent, is agree with you. They don't like to disagree with you. They like to agree with you. So they're quick to say, I just heard from this person. I know they're a registered voter. I want to say, yes, I agree with you. I'm saying yes. What did you say yes to? I have no idea, but they did, and I was sending yes to them. And then the legislator finds out it wasn't quite what they thought, but he's already stuck on stupid and he can't move off. Because the greatest threat to a member of Congress is being stuck on stupid. But so they don't claim they're stupid, they claim they're smart. But they know deep down inside that they were stupid. So I would like to have those little boxes of knowledge sit in a little cabinet outside the House chamber. That's the way it works at the White House today. If you go to the White House, you put your cell phone in a box and it sits in a locked case, and you can get it when you leave the White House. You can't have it when you're walking around the White House. And believe me, you cannot take any electronic device into the Situation Room.